Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Black Lightning. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do really appreciate kind of like the position that Jennifer finds herself in. She's kind of torn between, doing what her dad wants her to do, her dad and Nyssa, because they're part of the resistance and everything, and she said in herself, like, she feels in her heart that they're on the right side of things, but she also feels like Odell is kind of right, that he is protecting Freeland from the Markovians, but she kind of feels like there's a little bit of right, there's right on both sides, but there's also wrong on both sides, and so now she's kind of torn between the two of like, okay, so which path am I meant to follow, because she's making this recording to talk to Anissa, but she decides not to, because she's like, you know what, I might as well say this directly to you. But unbeknownst to her, obviously Odell is always keeping tabs on her, so he ends up referencing it later on of like, oh, you need to pick a side. The time for choosing a side is closely approaching, so kind of showing that he was listening in, so kind of shows you, come on, for D-bag, Odell is, but for him, he's trying to tell her like she needs to kind of, get it in gear. The fact of the matter is, your dad and the resistance, they were kind of an annoyance. Now they've grown into a nuisance, but at the same time, it's like, because Jennifer's starting to doubt what he's really doing for Freeland, because the fact of the matter is, going as far as you're going, like, to do things, like, can you really still say that this is all for the good of Freeland? Because now she's even questioning his own motives and stuff like that, because for him it's like, we do what's necessary, because obviously she blew up that station a couple episodes back, and obviously it hit her at the time, but now it's really hitting her. The fact is, she potentially killed people. It's like, yeah, they were Markovians, but it doesn't matter, I still took lives. And for her, it's like, because her dad isn't willing to cross that line to take lives, but she already did, and it's like, how much blood can you live on your hands? And obviously that's a lot for her to kind of, she's still a teenager and still dealing with all of that, trying, almost like still in the process of figuring out her place in the world, especially with her powers and everything. And she has Odell telling her to kind of use her powers a certain way. All the while, the whole situation with the resistance isn't going well, because their broadcast outside of Freeland gets chopped down, because like, apparently the ASA got to it at first, so they make it seem like, oh no, like the government's dealing with anti-vaxxers, so it's like, oh, they're still believing that it's some outbreak in Freeland, so the truth is still not out there, so any hopes of getting some help from the world outside of Freeland isn't going to come, because they think it's all part of the same problem. So now it's a whole conversation about, well, what do we do now? Because obviously after what they did last episode, the ASA is going to be coming after the resistance pretty hard. And so it turns into a thing of, obviously Jeff is like, we need to strike back, sure, but obviously you have Anissa kind of be more like, whatever the case may be, like, the fact is it was Khalil, the fact is he's back somehow, we got to put him down, which Jeff is like, no, that's still Khalil. She's like, no, he's an animal, he needs to be put down. Like, the fact of the matter is, he killed Tavon and he almost killed me. The fact of the matter is, that's not him anymore, because it's that whole thing of both Jennifer and Anissa having a problem with their dad's like no killing rule, because like for them it's like, the fact of the matter is, we might have to get our hands dirty, because your way of doing things isn't going to stop this whole situation. We might have to get our hands a little bloody if it means doing this, which obviously that's a very befitting aspect to this episode, because the whole crisis event is affecting Black Lightning, which I knew that Black Lightning was going to crossover. I mean, hell, like Jeff is on the poster for Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I wasn't sure how they were going to, like, I thought like they'd be in the middle of everything here and Freeland, and then he gets sucked up. I didn't know like literally the antimatter would be coming to hit them, which also shows that obviously, because that was a question of like, well, where does Black Lightning take place? So this proves that that Black Lightning does take place at some other Earth on the multiverse. They made a point not to say specifically which one, because I guess this way, if they ever need to use a different Earth in the future, this way they don't have to specify what number it is, because it's interesting, because they specify what Earth Supergirl is on. They made a point of it. I mean, maybe going forward with this crossover, they will specify like, oh, this is Earth 92 or something, something like that. We'll see it in the grand scheme of things. But obviously, because of Jennifer's abilities, her power makes her affect this. The antimatter is actually affecting her on a different level because her powers kind of convert. She converts stuff into energy. So, like, obviously, this is having some adverse effect on her ability, and basically it causes her almost basically her psyche, I guess, her consciousness, or rather herself in general, to basically end up in this void space where she's crossing path with other two versions of herself. One version of her from Earth 1 and the other from Earth 2, which is interesting because that also shows you that time is working a little differently. I mean, I was kind of always under the impression that time worked differently on different Earths. I would just assume that was kind of how this whole multiverse thing worked, but I guess certain things made it seem like it didn't, because obviously it had been like 12 years on Earth 2 but I mean, maybe certain Earths are closer on a time frame than others. But just because, like, the fact is Earth 2 Jennifer is there, it's like, but we already know Earth 2 got destroyed during events in Arrow. But I guess that also it's further proof that obviously the shows are on different spectrums, in the sense that, like, they're at different points in time, not just because of the whole crisis event, but just because the shows themselves are literally at different points in time. Like, obviously, once again, Batwoman literally starts before the events of the Elseworld crossover, well beforehand, because Kate wasn't Batwoman at the time, so it's kind of a similar thing in this regard. Huge tangent, but it presented a very interesting thing, because obviously this represents, like, our Jennifer is kind of torn in between the roads of which path she's going to go down. Is she going to go down her dad's path? Is she going to go down the path with Odell? And obviously each one represents the path that she potentially could choose. Jen from Earth 1, basically she infected the water of Freeland and made it so that anyone who drank it would immediately lose their ability. So all the metahumans have been removed from Earth 1, which obviously this is Earth 1, obviously, which is interesting how they're going to do that. I mean, to be fair, we know metahumans were an experiment made in Freeland, which is interesting because I kept wondering, like, we know how metahumans became a thing on the Flash just because of the particle accelerator, and obviously that hit just Central City. So that, and obviously because of Freeland's whole situation with metahumans, it allows it to stay the isolated thing where it's like everything that happened in the Flash making metahumans stays isolated, while everything that made metahumans and Freeland still kind of stayed isolated. So I think it still fits nicely, but it's a whole complicated thing because of what she did. She went against Odell's orders, so he ends up locking her in a pit. So she gets thrown in a pit like Tobias. So it's like I think that's an interesting thing of basically you're almost comparing Earth 1 Jennifer to Tobias. But it's a whole situation of obviously, like, her dad publicly has to be like, oh, shame on my daughter for doing what she did, but secretly it's like, oh, you did a good job, you did a great thing. And obviously, even the fact is Anissa on Earth 1, she has to hide that she's gay, which is interesting because that's kind of a similar parallel to, like, Alex, because Alex hadn't really discovered herself because she didn't have Kara on Earth. Earth 1, Alex doesn't have a Kara to kind of, have someone, to be her best friend and eventually kind of, open up that side of herself too, which is interesting considering the fact is Anissa, no matter what Earth, has Jennifer, which she was able to tell her, like, what girlfriend, spill the tea about this girl you're into, So that was kind of neat. But obviously it's the whole, it's the thing of, like, no matter what path you choose, there's always going to be consequences. And basically in this world, Jeff was helping the Reverend or pastor, which one was it? Regardless, helping him, do what they're doing on Earth 1. I mean, well, with this main continuity of Black Lightning, kind of doing underground railroad for metahumans, trying to keep them out of the ASA's clutches. He ends up catching a bullet in the head because he ends up telling that Jeff, despite all this, even though Jeff is like, oh yeah, he's like, I'm teaching the ASA history like you want me to kind of basically skew people's mind to be like, oh man, super pro ASA, they're our heroes, they're so great, they're amazing. But, and Odell being who he is, puts a bullet in Jeff, which Jennifer breaks down because it's like, it's my fault. I made this decision and dad has to suffer for it. And it's like looking at, mom and dad, looking at Lynn and Jeff, it's like their relationship, because like almost like, I guess, no matter what the Earth is, or at least maybe the continuity of Black Lightning we know is kind of similar to Earth 1, where it's like Lynn and Jeff definitely have their complications. They love each other. They can't be with each other, but they can't be without each other. It turns out, like, obviously Lynn's been so dedicated to her work, which is true in this continuity as well. So she wasn't there a lot during all of this, and Jennifer only had Anissa and Jeff, but now she's blaming herself because like this is the choices I made that did this, but and then later on, Lynn coming to visit her. That was interesting where Lynn was kind of like, me and your dad, we talk all the time. He'd be so proud of you and all that. And you have Lynn being like, oh no, like the fact is you were able to create this peace, so you should be proud of what you did. But for Jennifer, it's like, how can you just really say that this is peace, considering the fact is ASA has control of Freeland, and the fact is that they could just stroll in, kill Dad like it's nothing, and just bounce. And it's just kind of like, the fact of the matter is this type of peace really necessary? Is this really a true peace if the fact is, Dad ends up dying and I'm locked up? Was it all worth it? And to have Lynn be like, yes, it's heartbreaking because it's like, because that's the thing. Like, I think to get true peace, you don't compromise yourself. And that's the whole thing of not being willing to sacrifice others no matter what the circumstances are. Obviously, like that's been a very prominent aspect to this whole Arrowverse situation of people's unwillingness to sacrifice others. That's actually been obviously a big thing in Supergirl and everything. So I think that's such an interesting element that you have Lynn be like, no, it was all worth it because as so many lives are saved. But it's like, once again, but you're in a world that's, or at least Freeland that's under the control of the ASA and they're able to kind of do whatever they want to. So there's that. Then there's Earth 2 Jennifer, who basically works for Odell and is legitimately his weapon. I do like at one point in time that they do play, and a very befitting song is Angels and Demons by A Boogie with a Hoodie and Juice WRLD, R.I.P. Juice WRLD. But a very befitting song, especially in that moment where she basically killed all these metahumans. They were metahumans that were used by Odell as a weapon, but Jennifer's like, well, the Markovians are gone, so you don't need these metahumans, because they could be potentially used as weapons again. So it's like, but I was actually halfway expecting her to kill Odell in that moment because it's the whole conversation of loyalty, but the whole conversation of loyalty was more so about her family, but I think it still applied to Odell as well. Because for her, she tried to make it seem like everything she did was of her own choice. It's like, yeah, Odell pointed me in the right direction, but I made the choice to do this on my own. So, which is kind of crazy considering the fact is what we just experienced with Earth 99 Batman, and to see that Jennifer is literally on that level, just straight up like, oh yeah, let's murder everyone. It's like, Jesus, Jennifer, that's nuts. And it's crazy to think about it. I mean, the way Bruce from Earth 99 talked about it is like you start with one and it takes another. Almost I think of almost like it gets easier. I mean, hell, Jeff struggled with the whole trying to kill one person, but I guess it's like once you get over that hump, it's just smooth sailing to a certain extent. I mean, I guess that's kind of the whole thing of sadly, like Jennifer no longer kind of burned away all of her soul because in her mind, it almost seemed like it wasn't even about what was right or wrong anymore. It was just kind of like, I got this power, I'm going to use it because this is what I've decided to do. Dad, you're too much of a weakling to do what was necessary to save Freeland. I saved Freeland and made peace. So it's interesting making peace in different regards. Almost, selling your soul for a very tainted version of peace. And there's another one that basically involves sacrificing yourself and everyone that you care about for peace. So both not viable options necessarily, just the fact of the matter, just opposite, like I said, opposite spectrums. And obviously the Jennifer we've known and followed this entire time is smack dab in the middle of these two crossroads. But obviously there is a third path. She just hasn't figured it out yet. But it was such a, it seems like because she found that gray area especially. But regardless, the fact that Jennifer went as far as she did, fighting not only Anissa, she ended up killing Anissa, her mom, and Jeff. That was, I like that because like basically like because Anissa, it's like she flashes Anissa in the eyes. It's like pretty hard to hold your breath when you're kind of like losing focus, but doesn't matter because Jennifer, I mean, to be fair, Jennifer is stronger than her dad because it's like she's able to kind of literally convert everything into energy. So she kind of has an unlimited supply. Unlike her dad, she doesn't necessarily need her suit. He needs his suit to kind of make sure his powers don't kind of, work as a double-edged sword against him. And so I guess even with Anissa's abilities, like I guess Jennifer's power is so powerful that it can still pierce her, bulletproof skin, her bulletproof skin is basically, her skin of steel. So And even to the point, kind of using her dad's speech about who does her future belong to. It's like, oh, I guess not you. Literally using that against him after she killed him. I'm like, that's gnarly. Especially because she basically electrocuted her dad, and we see him kind of like burning from the inside because of it. It's like, Jesus, that's a lot. And you do see her kind of looking around and almost kind of taking a deep breath, because I think there's a part of her that's kind of swallowing whatever it was, like part of her that was kind of feeling bad about it. It's like she either like kind of snuffed it out and kind of buried it deep in that moment, or whatever little tiny bit of light was left in her got snuffed out. Whatever the case may be, that's hardcore. I still was halfway expecting Odell to show up and kill her, because it's like, well, you're the last metahuman, blah, 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 bam. I kind of expected that, but it never came about. I mean, to be fair, who's to say that future for that, for Jennifer on Earth 2, that wouldn't have been, the case anyway. But obviously back on Earth 1, a lot of, not Earth 1, I keep doing that. The continuity that we've come to follow of Black Lightning, whatever Earth this may be. Obviously, we had Lynn literally going all Walter White and it's making her own green light, which obviously she's doing that before, but wasn't she literally in their house cooking that up? That's gnarly. It's almost like, oh yeah, your daughter's going through what she's going through right now, but you're kind of missing out because they can't get in contact with you because you're too busy trying to get high. So, I mean, you're so deluded at this point just because of drugs and everything. You're thinking you're doing it for the right reasons, when in fact you're not. Jeff and the Resistance hit, the main headquarters of the ASA. Obviously, that pisses Odell off. So, obviously, it's like, oh, Jeff doesn't want to come here to the pit because he knows he might end up killing people, and obviously he wants to avoid that. Odell using the fact is that Jeff's a decent person to his advantage. It's like, oh, look at you. Look at you trying to be a hero, a good, decent person. Blech. It's going to be your undoing. It's just, so that's Odell's whole situation. So, they're planning on using all the metahumans they have captured right now, giving them green light and chipping them up to make them into weapons, which even his is it Major? I think it was Major, or is it Sergeant? I think it's Major Gray. Even she's like, come on, they're not trained, and even bringing up they're kids, sir. But it's like, who cares? They're going to be weapons soon. And he's saying it with a smile. It's like, man, it's just like you ooze evil, Odell. It's just. And it just kind of Gray's just kind of like, yeah, I think it's just back to that thing of like, yeah, you might not 100% agree. It's hard to say because obviously she brought up the point of like they're not trained first and foremost. But then she also brought up the fact is, once again, they're kids, but, for Odell, it doesn't matter. It just makes it that much harder for Jeff to kind of fight them back potentially. So we'll see where that goes, because that doesn't turn into a situation yet. I'm sure we'll circle back to that soon enough in the future of Black Lightning. But obviously there's the whole thing about Khalil, Lynn saying no, Nissa saying yes. Yes, we need to kill him. It's like, yeah, you and Dad might not agree a lot, but you both sound like each other in this moment, which obviously there's even the thing of Lynn blaming Jeff, saying that this is all Jeff's fault, that things have kind of come down to the way they have been, because it's like, oh, you started this war with the ASA, and it's like, but he started it for a particular reason. He kept fighting it. He pushed off, once again, Lynn's not in the best mind state, but obviously I'm thinking this is more so the drugs than anything. Once again, it's just like she's got her own secrets that it's not like she's really spilling to anyone else. So it's a little hypocritical, but at the same time, it's like I said, I chalk it up for her not being in her right mind. Like obviously her and Jeff kind of from the beginning didn't agree on certain things, but I think it's just because her mind is so warped right now into thinking like she's doing good, which obviously this whole parallel, different Jennifers could actually, that situation could apply very nicely to Lynn right now, just showing you like the outcome of this whole situation of, if she saw what, Jennifer was seeing, I wonder how would that change her tune about this whole situation. So that's interesting. But Jennifer took this opportunity to kind of, recognize like, she ended up fighting her Earth 2 form, her Earth 2 version. And it's like, it's like the fact of the matter is, in your world, you literally have nothing or no one left to love you. But for her, she doesn't care because all she cares about is power. But it's like, she doesn't want to end up like Earth 2 Jennifer, so consumed with power that she sacrifices everything. It's like, yeah, my dad's code isn't perfect, but the fact of the matter is, it's how he stayed alive this entire time, how he's kept himself on the right path. But me, like, the fact of the matter is, I might have to live with the blood that's on my hand, but the fact of the matter is, I'm never going to let myself become you. Then she tells Earth 1 Jen, never give up your powers. It's like, your dad's, dad said, to do what you wanted to do because he knew that you were going to do it regardless. That was him being like, just kind of make your own choices. It wasn't him trying to tell you what to do, It wasn't him 100% agreeing with your choices. It's just that, hey, he knew that you were going to do this with or without him, because that's just how Jennifer is. She's very rebellious like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but it's like, our powers are a gift from God, and the fact is, if God didn't want us to have these powers, we wouldn't have them. And it's so interesting because that's not to the same, because obviously like the Pierce family kind of comes at it from a religious standpoint of like, oh, we have these powers for a reason, which very similar to Barry, it's like, the Speed Force chose him and everything. Like, it's kind of a similar thing, similar yet different thing of kind of being chosen for your powers and stuff like that. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there is some higher power that may put all our heroes in the positions that they're in right now. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing in the long run, but just kind of to think about. But in that moment at the end, we have Earth 2 disappearing at the same time Earth 1, which I'm like, whoa, time frames all over the place, but that means at some point Earth 1 is going to fall. That's interesting foreshadowing going forward. Like I said, the time frame's just all over the place, but obviously it's like, yo, their Earth is getting wiped out. It's like, yo, what's going on? And then Jeff gets portaled away. I'm like, oh, so that's his jump start into this whole thing, which I think Jennifer's okay, because I was like, I think Jennifer needs this moment of clarity. She needs to be able to keep it. I mean, to be fair, probably like the moment potentially when this whole situation is all said and done, they'll all come back to the moment before everything disappeared. That doesn't just apply to this. It probably applies to Argo City, as well as all of the different Earths that kind of end up getting destroyed because of this whole antimatter wave. Or maybe because Jennifer is in the position that she's in that energy form right now, that she can't be 100% destroyed. Maybe because she was in flux at the time of their world getting destroyed, she didn't die. But it's sucky because you see Anissa, Lynn, and Gamby, because that's like seeing that Earth 2 situation all over again, of seeing, his mom, Oliver seeing his mom disappear, to see Tommy disappearing like that. So it's kind of like that very same situation, and hard cut to an end where it's like, to be continued into the Crisis event, which obviously part 3 is tomorrow, obviously today at the time of this going live. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how Jeff fits in all this, especially because it's like, wait, what just happened? It's like, yeah, your world must have been wiped out. It's like, dude, he just lost his children in that moment, which is like, yeah, that's a complicated thing, because Barry could relate, because it's like, well, I technically lost my daughter last year. Still technically this year, I think that's still technically, it still technically counts as this year. I mean, obviously he lost Nora last season. Oliver's in that complicated situation of obviously like his family's in danger and stuff like that. Both his children, as a father of 2 as well, he can kind of relate to Jeff as well. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how Jeff matches up with the rest of our heroes as we entered, like I said, part 3 of this Crisis on Infinite Earths event, with the Flash. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, obviously, what this sets up for Black Lightning in the future. And once again, that all is determined by what ends up happening because of this Crisis Day. Because the reason why this kind of caught me by surprise, even them kind of the planet their Earth getting wiped out necessarily caught me by surprise, is because the whole point was to keep Black Lightning kind of separate from the rest of the Arrowverse, because it's not technically part of the Arrowverse, but this kind of makes it part of the Arrowverse. What that means going forward, like I said, that depends on how this whole Crisis thing ends. I know what it means comic book wise, but I'm curious to see obviously like what it means in the context of the Arrowverse and all these DC shows. So ultimately I have to wait and see. So I'm very interested to see, like I said, where it all takes us going forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good